Hi everybody, welcome back to Find My Past from Home, the free family history series where you get to connect with each other, we get to connect with you, and we all get to connect together, and it's really nice. And I'm not alone today. I hope you all had a lovely weekend. I've got Jen with me. Yay!
Yay!
How are you, Jen?
I'm doing well. It's cold and gray skies and a couple of snowflakes this morning, actually, though, in northern Colorado. So not quite ready for the turn in the weather, but other than that, I'm good.
I'm a little bit jealous because it's just sort of gone a bit dreary here in Scotland, if I'm honest. Please do say hello in the comments, everybody. Say where you're tuning in from today, what the weather's like with you, and all of that jazz. We've already got Ellen joining us. Hello. Sunny for you. It's good to hear. We've got Karen with us as well, and we've got Roz, who also says it's sunny in Massachusetts. I've always wanted to visit Massachusetts.
It's such a cool place. Boston's incredible. Everybody should go to these places at least once in their life, I feel like.
Absolutely.
I had a great visit in Boston.
I've got Maria tuning in from Brainey, Lancashire, and Linda says we've turned her week upside down by doing this on a Monday. Yes, sorry.
You're welcome, Linda. You're welcome.
Yes, we've done this on a Monday because we thought we had such big news to announce last week, and what we thought we would do is do a little bit of a research prepping session for everybody. So that's really what today is going to be, because we're so excited for you all to start discovering your 1920s ancestors in January. Really, really exciting news. Mary, incidentally, Mary McKee is in the comments with us today. So please say hello to her. She's going to be answering questions on the spot and things like that. We will try and answer some of your questions, but we can't answer all of them. Now, Jen, did you catch a clip of Mary's small screen debut at all?
I did, actually. So, BBC is blocked for me in the States, but I will quietly say that one of my colleagues at Findmypast kind of recorded it for me on their phone. So I got a bootlegged copy. Yeah.
Yay! Yeah, so those of you who don't know, Mary McKee, who is one of our dear colleagues, she was on BBC Morning Live, which was just after BBC Breakfast last week. I think it was Wednesday. So I think the days are sort of blurring into one at the moment. Yes, and, she was talking all about the upcoming 1921 census for England and Wales. All of that was filmed at Titchfield, which is where they did all the conservation and scanning work, 3 years worth of work, which is just amazing. And yes, she also did an interview on BBC Radio 4's You and Yours programme, which was on Saturday, and I shared a link to that on Twitter if anybody wants to go and catch that. I think it's about a 5-minute segment. So yes. Right, I'm just going to share my slides. Add the slides in, shall we, Jen? Because we've come prepared for you all today, everybody, haven't we, Jen?
We have indeed. And obviously the whole team at Findmypast has been thinking about how to make this successful for a very long time. So 1921 census is coming, and we want to make sure that you guys are all ready as well as us.
Exactly. Right, I can't remember what the first slide is, so I'm just going to
just go. Yeah,
I was only looking at these 5 minutes ago, believe it or not, everybody. I've actually put makeup on today just for all of you and for you as well, Jen.
Thank you,
Jen. I don't know if you noticed, we actually all had a company meeting at 2 o'clock, virtual company meeting, and my makeup was half finished, so I was missing my eyebrows and my lipstick. Did you notice, Jen?
I didn't actually, but it was also, so 2 o'clock your time was 8 o'clock in the morning for me, so I was still kind of sipping on some coffee and trying to wake up a little, so that's okay.
That's fair enough. I think the first thing we need to talk about, if you want to really get prepared for the arrival of the 1921 census, is getting your Findmypast account ready, because it will be available exclusively online at Findmypast. You'll be able to view it for free at the National Archives at Kew, should you wish to. But if you want to do it online from the comfort of your own home, from your sofa, from your kitchen table, then you're going to need a Findmypast account. And you can actually create a Findmypast account for free, can't you, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. It's super easy. You just need an email address, and that's it. Actually, an email address, and that's it. You click a couple boxes, tell us what you're giving us permission to do, and that's it.
Exactly. And if you've already got an existing Findmypast account, now I imagine a lot of you watching today already have one. But just in case you haven't, or if you have got one and maybe you've not used it for a while, I would recommend, in fact, I think both of us would recommend going in now ahead of the 6th of January 2022 to make sure that your password's right and your email address is correct and all of that.
Yeah.
It takes you I was going to say 5 minutes. It doesn't take you 5 minutes to reset your password.
I'm going to guess 120 seconds.
120 seconds to reset your password. That's a good guess. Well worth doing ahead of time, making sure that that is all in order. Yes. And I think the next thing is newsletters. So in your Findmypast account, if you go into your account settings, you can opt in or out of receiving things like offers from us and partner discounts and also newsletters. So if you opt in to receive your newsletters, you can make sure that you get our Findmypast Fridays email, which is very, very popular, and you get news of all the amazing records that we've added every week, courtesy of Jen's team and also Mary's team. This is all the work they do, not just on Findmypast from home.
We do stuff outside of this broadcast.
Exactly. So that's the kind of thing you can get delivered into your inbox, free updates, and there's also going to be, exciting 1921 census updates as well.
And I encourage that newsletter because there's never in the history of humankind have we been making historical records available at this rate, right? Digitization and the internet has just changed historical preservation, the field of historical preservation. So it is a lot to keep up with, right? There's a lot of resources out there. And if you're getting an email from Findmypast and let's say the National Archives at Kew and the National Library of Scotland and maybe the National Archives in the United States, you are ahead of the game in terms of making sure that you're up to date on what's available for you to research, right? And as you work through that, you can adjust your research plan on your whole entire family history project as you go, because you're getting these weekly updates. It makes it, for me at least, it's an easy way to capture kind of everything new that I want to look at because I opt into newsletters from all of those institutions.
Absolutely. And I've lost count of the amount of times one of us has done a Fridays live broadcast and we've said, these are the new records this week. This is what's cool about them. Why don't you go check them out? And then the next week somebody comes back and goes, actually, I went and looked at your new records and it broke down a brick wall for me. And I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm just going to make a comment. It is snowing now. Like it's actually snowing, not just a random little flake, big flakes. At first I thought there was like a feather flying around my office window, but it's not. It's snow.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I really want some snow, but maybe not till January, February for Edinburgh, I would imagine. So the next thing is definitely make sure you're following us on social media. Now, I would hope that many of you already do follow us on social media, but for anybody watching the recording back, definitely give us a follow because you're going to get quick access to content like this. So help content that hopefully should inspire you as well, and just lots of news. And also you get access to our amazing online community, and you're all wonderful.
You are all wonderful. I lurk on the Findmypast forum more than I participate because I learn so much from all of you. We can only all be really, really smart and intelligent and experts on so many things, right? I can't be an expert on everything, and neither can Ellie, and neither can Mary, and neither can Claire or Nicole or Lorna or David, who's here watching with us. But between all of us together, we have this incredible library of knowledge, and it's all available on our social media and the Findmypast forum and in sessions like this. And it's mind-blowing how much we can learn from each other.
I think that's very well said, Jen.
Well, thank you.
Janet apparently is having a problem with her newsletters. That's not good, Janet.
Oh, no.
Drop an email to customer support at findmypast.com and they will sort this out for you.
Yeah, we'll get that squared away right away, Janet.
Definitely need to get those into your inbox.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, and last but not least, so if you are a 12-month Pro subscriber, you will get a 10% discount on all 1921 census purchases, which is really exciting.
I'm gonna comment on this, Karen. Karen says we need these live sessions every day. And if that were to be the case, Karen, I think we'd need to hire several more staff members.
Although, do you remember, Jen, when we first started doing Findmypast from home on a regular basis at the beginning of lockdown in March 2020, we were doing 4 a week.
That's right. And it's a lot.
But it was so worth it.
It's so worth it. It's a lot of fun.
We connected so much during that time.
Yeah.
Not just you and I, but the rest of the community.
Everybody. Yeah.
Exactly. And I just think it was, we were all stuck at home, and it was just a way for us all to connect on a daily basis. And I thought that was really nice. It helped me a lot. Goodness.
Oh gosh, during lockdown, it was amazing. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, right. Okay. So that's account stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move on. So I think what I will do is hand over to you, Jen, for this, because you made this slide. Thank you. What are we going to, what can we expect from the census itself, and why is that important?
Yeah, let's even just back up just a second and think about what our objective is today, right? We're talking about how to prepare for the 1921 census, and this is a monumentally large document, right? This record set, this collection is so many millions of names that I think for many of us, it's going to quickly get overwhelming. So having a good research plan now and working on that now and prepping our research now so that on January 6th, when it launches, we can just all dive straight in and know exactly what we're looking for. That is going to make that day and that week of exploration and discovery just so much more meaningful, because everything and every person in your tree that you want to investigate on will already have kind of this big story kind of fresh in your mind. So I would think that in order to set up for this and to prepare a research plan, you need to think about some of these things that are on the slide, right? How was the census actually taken? What questions were asked on the census itself? And that changes, right, with just about every census. What are you likely to find, and what will you not find this time that you're used to from previous censuses, right? What's the difference between the 1911 and the 1921? And certainly what makes the census stand out, right? There's a lot to that question. You could be thinking about someone who is, our family who has been in London for multiple generations, or you could be looking for someone who immigrated to Australia in 1922, and this is the last known record that they are in their home country, right? So there's a lot to think about in terms of how this census will kind of change the game a bit for family historians. And then, of course, we would encourage you to learn about the effort required to make the census available online, and all of the work that Mary and her team in particular went through to actually make this happen. And we've already shared some of that content. I know on Friday they did a fabulous session about what it took to actually digitize the census. And really, really incredible material and effort, especially through a pandemic, right? So I can't even believe it. So all of these things, you need to kind of start asking these questions of yourself as you look at creating a research plan. So next slide, Ellie.
Next slide. Okay.
Next slide.
So what will the census tell us, Jen?
What will the census tell us? So these are the things that you can expect. You're going to get a full address of the property. And for house historians, oh yeah, that is exciting. I'm excited about that. You're going to get names of the persons in each household and their relationship, of course, to the head of household. All these things are pretty standard. You're going to get their age, but for the first time, you're going to get that in years and months.
That's
not just
so
years.
Helpful.
Yeah. So if you are looking for someone who you don't know an exact birth date for, this is going to narrow that down for you in a really, really refined way. Of course, you're going to get their sex. You're going to get a question around whether they are married or orphaned. So, and this is different, right? So this is the first time that divorce has been recorded. So the marriage question will either list single, married, widowed, or divorced. And that's the first time in a UK or England, I have to be careful with my terminology, English and Welsh census, right? That's the first time to record marriages that have been dissolved under divorce. The orphan side of that question, for people under 15, this records if both parents were alive if the father was dead, the mother was dead, or they were both dead. And right, of course, we all know that we are at the, World War I has just finished. They take this giant census, and you're thinking about the impact of World War I. So we know that there is going to be a greater proportion of widows recorded in the 1921 census than there will be in the 1911 census. And the numbers sit around 730,000 children recorded with father dead, and 260,000 children with mother dead. So
Wow.
that distinction in that question about marriage or orphan, that ability to be able to say father versus mother or both is actually really, really important, especially when you're looking at kind of that greater World War I story and the impact of that war.
And even just for individual families as well, that one question tells so much
Absolutely.
of that person's
Absolutely.
story.
Yep. And you think about, a man who goes off to war, leaves behind a family, 3 or 4 kids, whatever the situation is, doesn't come home. And what was the impact financially and socially on that woman who's now solely responsible for the household income and everything else? Like, the economic repercussions of that situation are incredible. And you may already know that about your ancestors and your ancestors' family, but this is going to make sure that you absolutely tell that full picture, that full story.
Yeah, I'll be completely honest. A lot of this is familiar to me on the list. The orphaned question was not. Mm-hmm. That's new. That's news to me. So you learn something new every day.
Yeah. It's pretty. And that's not a discovery I made. I credit Mary and her team actually for cultivating all of this information for us and the stats behind all of this. So just, marching forth a little bit, the census will also tell us the place of birth, and for people born outside the UK, the nationality, right? And again, we have to think about the time frame that we're in, right? Tourism is a much bigger thing now. People are able to travel across the oceans in a much more effective and efficient way than ever before. So I was actually just over the weekend reading an article about American tourism in the British Isles in that interwar period. And so and what are we going to find, right? And so the possibilities, I think, of people who are what we would refer to today as expats, right? Americans or Canadians or Australians living in England and Wales, kind of that return migration type story, that's going to be a really interesting angle to look for as well. We also have a question around occupation and employment, and excitingly, the employer was recorded, and this is just amazing information, right? It's absolutely a gold mine. I can't wait to get into this. Not just knowing that your ancestor was, working in manufacturing or working for a newspaper, but actually which newspaper was that person employed by. That's so amazing. I think it's exciting. I don't know of any U.S. census that's ever done this, or actually any other country that does a routine, every decade census. I can't think of any others that record the employer. It's really exciting. And then, of course, whole part-time work, education. So there's a question around whether they were in school full-time or part-time, and that includes the youngsters, but also the university age and adults taking classes as well. So you're out in the workforce and you're taking an evening course or something. That question included that population. So that will also be really cool, because okay, my ancestors working in a warehouse or in manufacturing, but I want to be a journalist. I want to work for that newspaper. So I'm taking an evening class on journalism or photography or something, and actually being able to try and move myself into that career field. That's cool. I love that.
Oh, there's a good comment here from Beth saying, woohoo for stating the employer. I agree. Will help to confirm or correct family stories. And this is exactly the same with me, actually. And I'm sure for anybody that's got ancestors who worked in sort of the Birmingham area, there's a family story that, my family were connected to the Cadburys. And I really want to try and prove that. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to do that with this census.
And Victoria also had another good point. We've talked specifically about World War I and its impact, but also the Spanish flu, right? Of course. And she's saying that the Spanish flu wiped out her great-grandparents, leaving her grandmother an orphan. But her father might have made it just past 1921. So that would be, and I'm sure for Victoria, that will probably be one of the first things she looks up. With a surname like Joyce, it will really help my research. And that's a really, really good point, Victoria. And thank you for leaving that comment. That there's a lot of factors from a social history perspective that we all need to be thinking about in terms of preparing for the census.
And I think also, I mean, it's something we've not quite included on the slides, Jen, but I suppose we've got to be prepared to find anything in these records.
Yeah.
And the same can be said for any genealogy records.
Sure.
You could come across something that makes you laugh, something that makes you cry, something that shocks you, something that connects with you on a deeply emotional level that you couldn't quite describe. I think just being prepared for that is important.
Absolutely. Yep. And, I've always said, and I will continue to say, family history as a rule is just intrinsically emotional, right? It cuts you to the core. And that's one of the reasons why so many of us do it, right? And we stick with it. That's what makes it so powerful and so important to us, is that it does kind of generate this series of emotions and allows us to connect to our family in a much different way than in any other hobby, really. So yeah, absolutely have to be prepared for anything.
And in fact, I can't say much about this just now, but spoiler alert for everybody, sort of spoiler alert, I'm going to tease this a little bit. I'm going to be interviewing a lovely lady who has published a book about the story of finding her mum's true family. That particular book is actually out in print now in the UK, but we'll be having 3 copies of that book to give away. And we're going to be doing a bit of a podcast with her in November. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. Here's a good question from Leslie. I hope you don't mind if we bring this up on screen, Jen.
No,
will we be unlocking just a person or the household like the 1939 register?
Why don't you answer that, Ellie?
Yes, so it's the household that you unlock. It's not just the one person.
And I asked you to answer that because I wanted to read the next slide and make sure I knew what was.
Oh, okay. Can I go to the next slide now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
So there's a few situations in which the census is a little bit different, right? This is another angle of knowing what to expect with the 1921 census. So there's some special circumstances. They did enumerate institutions and prisons. So there'll be a schedule for that, a different type of schedule. For merchant vessels, for the armed forces, there'll be some additional questions around that function kind of within that institution, rank, trade, rather than occupation, right? For armed forces, they'll be asking about rank instead of occupation necessarily. We also know that the schedule for Wales and the Isle of Man include an additional language question. They asked if each person spoke Welsh or Manx, English, or both, which is, Ellie, I'm sure you're excited about that.
Well, it is exciting because like the first census my great-grandfather appeared on was the 1911 census. And I think he would have been about 6 or 7 at the time it was taken. And he is listed in that as only speaking Welsh.
Oh.
And as far as I know, according to my grandmother, he was bilingual. So really interesting to see if that
maybe by
changes.
1921 he learned English.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. So then one of the other facets of the language question that's a little bit different is that the armed forces schedule also asks if the person can speak Welsh or Gaelic in addition to English. So those will be things to watch for. This was also, of course, the first census that recorded the Royal Air Force, so the RAF, and their overseas stations, since, obviously it'd be the first census since they created the RAF. So Army bases and ships of the Royal Navy are included, but from a military perspective, that RAF piece is the brand new part, which is exciting.
Absolutely. Okay, shall I flip over to the next slide?
Oh, that's good.
That's good. Okay. Am I on the right one? Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
so it's time to get your family tree ready, everybody. Jen, how are you preparing your family tree for the census?
Well, that's an interesting question because I don't actually have anybody in the 1921 census.
I'll answer the question then
no.
if you want.
I am actually looking, what I'm doing is looking at potential DNA matches and doing descendancy research from my last known ancestor in Britain and trying to figure out exactly who they left behind in the family so that I can find them in the 1921 census. Not a direct ancestor of mine, but collateral research so that I can do those DNA matches and reach out to those people and say, hey, take a DNA test. Help me out here. Please. So that's how I'm prepping my tree.
So in terms of how I'm prepping my tree, so when I like to do a little bit, because obviously our job being our job, sometimes it's tricky to find time to actually go and have a look at your own family tree. When I do find the time to go and look at it, I am spending, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes every week, just going through the people that I'm really after. So for me, it's mainly I've got 2 grandparents and then great grandparents who all should appear. So it's making sure that the hints for them are up to date, or the details are up to date, that I've trimmed everything else I can. If there's extraneous detail, yeah, I'm just trying to tidy it up a bit. I don't know if anybody else has this problem, but every now and then you just got to go in and prune the family tree a bit because it's just got a little bit out of control.
Yeah. And I'm gonna call this out. Philip, our dear friend and colleague Philip, says, does Jen need some family trees? No, I do not. I have plenty to look at. And part of building your research plan is the context around that individual. It's not just making sure that you've got your vital events covered, although that's a big part of it. It's all of that other research that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But no, Philip, I don't need any family trees.
Some of you may or may not have seen lovely Philip McGavin commenting on these live streams. He is one of our colleagues and we love him very much.
We do. And we actually don't. It sounds very weird to call him Philip, actually, because we just call him McGavin.
We don't call him Philip.
Yeah. So think about your tree already. And and that includes things like, if you work in a software program on your desktop as your primary tool, make sure that you do an upload of that GEDCOM and refresh your Findmypast tree so that the most current information, your most current research is actually in your Findmypast account. Ellie, what are you showing us here?
I'm showing everybody my list of people I want to find. It's actually a very short list. I'm just going to go in with my grandfather Cecil, who was my dad's dad, his parents, my nana, her parents, and then the rest are all great grandparents. So those who I'm going to go in and find, and there maybe a couple of great grandparents, but they should all be living in the same house anyway. So yeah, that's my list, everybody.
Fabulous. Now, have you really prioritized that list?
I have that is a priority list. I mean, it's in order of who I want to find first as well. So it's the grandparents first, then it'll be the great grandparents, and then the 2 times great grandparents maybe.
And how detailed is that list?
So
because that list
to find
is
the page
start,
again now,
that is the start of your research plan, but it's not complete yet.
No, it's not complete. You're absolutely right. So I've put in dates of birth, but I haven't put in where I expect to find them or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I haven't put where they were born, but mainly because that information's all in my head.
Yeah, that's the wrong place for it to be. Why don't you go ahead and flip to the next slide?
Okay. Let's do that. Maybe the next slide will help me.
I think so, because your research plan should be more than just a list, right? And I am fond of saying that a research plan can be as simple as a Post-it note or as complicated as a large Excel spreadsheet, if you would like it to be. It just has to work for you, right? That's the key to a good research plan. But some questions that you should be thinking about, right? Obviously, you want to prioritize the people on your list as to who you're going to look for first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Where are they most likely to be living in 1921? That's a big question, right? If you don't know that for sure from other evidence. Yeah, be writing this down, Ellie. Do you have the 1911 census and the 1939 register for every member of that household? Have you looked at electoral registers for year-over-year data? That is, if you're not sure where they're going to be in the 1921 census, those electoral registers are really going to help you substantially.
Absolutely. And I cannot recommend this enough to anybody who expects to find relatives or ancestors in this census. Go and have a look in the 1921 electoral roll now, because you can.
Yeah.
It'll give you their address. It'll give you anybody else who is in the house who's also on the electoral roll. So you won't get children on it. Honestly, go and take a look, because that will really help you shape said research plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really would encourage everybody, even if you think, oh, I've been looking for this person for 10 years and I know everything there is to know about them. Go back and re-look at all of those materials that you have already collected over time, right? Give yourself the time to make sure that you really haven't missed any details. Re-examine all of that evidence, and do so with the questions of the census in mind, right? Do you really know everything there is to know about their occupation? Because maybe maybe you actually don't have their employer for 1921, and this will fill that little gap. So make sure that you really give yourself the chance, give yourself the gift of time to re-examine all of your materials. And when you're doing that, think about all facets of life. I did a session, was it last week, Ellie, or the week before, on social history? Yeah. So think about everything in their life. Everything that affects you today affected them as well. So one of the easiest ways to fill in those data points is to use the All Record Sets page on Findmypast to identify the materials that you haven't yet looked at that match the time and place that you're interested in, and make sure you get all those details in now. So again, on January 6th, you are ready to go and you know literally everything there is to know. And of course, newspapers are really going to tell the stories, and we add new newspapers all the time. The team just digitizes newspapers at an incredibly fast rate and makes them available. So that newspaper context, that newspaper research should actually never really stop. It should always be something. And I would actually encourage you that if you do one thing every day from now until January 6th, it would be make sure that your tree is set up and your account is good to go, and join the social media pages and all those things, and then go to newspapers. If you feel like you know everything there is to know about your 1921 ancestor, go to the newspapers and find something new.
I think that's a really, really valid advice. And it's just, I think part of the reason, as you said, part of the reason to do this is to make sure that come the 6th of January, whether you're going to be waiting and you're going to be there as soon as it's online and you're going to be good to go, or whether you're going to wait a couple of days, whichever, come to the census organized. You know who you want to search for, and it's just going to save you a lot of time in the long run. And then by the time you've made these discoveries in the census itself, that can then act as a springboard to go and find other information. You might find a clue as to your ancestor's employer. You might find a piece of information about where they were born that then leads you to a birth certificate that you have been looking for 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's going to open up so many doors. The census isn't the stopping point. It's going to be a tool to help you uncover more stories, basically.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And Rosie has a great comment here. She says she's not an organized searcher, but I do know where grandfather was in 1911 to 1919, and then again 1924 and on. So 1921 is the really vital record. Who was he with? And this, Rosie, is exactly kind of what we're talking about, right? You don't have to be the most organized, structured family historian ever. What we're saying is take even at most a one-page document, handwritten, typed, whatever's easiest for you, and highlight some of these questions so that you are just ready to jump in, because there's no, especially for people with common names and things like that, where, if you're looking in the London area for someone with the last name of Smith, this one little tidbit in your notes from a couple of months worth of prep work might be the thing that says, that is exactly the right family, or exactly the right bachelor living on his own in a new neighborhood of London.
Exactly. Even if, I think the Post-it is a really good way about it, even if you're just putting a couple on the wall.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else does this.
I do mine across the bottom of my monitor, actually. So
I do that as well, but nobody can see that. So I thought I would
do
demonstrate on the wall.
Yeah. So I mentioned the all record sets page. I think that's a really useful tool in this context. Why don't you flip to the next screen?
Of course.
Just to make sure that everybody's familiar with that piece of the Findmypast website. So we've taken one of Ellie's ancestors, actually, Ralph, who was born in 1896. And the idea here is to make sure that we find for Ellie all the record sets that apply to Ralph from the time of his birth through the years of the census, right? So if you click next, you should get an arrow that pops up. All right, good. So I have filtered this to just where we believe Ralph to be, right? And I am not going to pronounce that county because I always get it wrong.
So Jen, I saw something on the social medias a couple of weeks ago, and it was a guide to how to pronounce English place names for somebody who, or English British, for somebody who isn't from the British Isles. And the general gist of it is, don't put in too much effort. So instead of saying Worcestershire, you sort of give up halfway through and you go Worcestershire.
Yeah, I'm just gonna let you say it. So, yeah, my household likes to joke about that particular word because of the sauce, right? Okay, so, and I know I will fall into bad habits here. So you limit this all record sets page to England and the county of interest, and then click one more time, Ellie, and then your time frame, right? And the key to this type of search because I'm not going into these records, I'm not going into all record sets page to go, I'm going to search the electoral registers today. I'm building a research plan. So what I want is every possible record set from birth year through the span of the 1921 census. So in this case, I've limited it to 1939 because that's the next major record set for this particular county. And I'm saying, I want to look in each one of these things. Now, for me, what I do is I just copy and paste this list into an Excel spreadsheet, and I just work my way through the list, right? So if I get 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, I'll go to my Excel spreadsheet or my Word document or my Post-it note, and I'll just say, okay, today I'm going to look at people in the news, and I'll just check that off my list until I have exhausted all of these record sets and make sure that I know, does he show up or not? And am I going to find him in an unusual place, a place I don't expect? Or is there another Ralph Overthrow that I need to be aware of that may be throwing off my search? Because I wouldn't assume that that's a very common name, but maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So, Ellie, is it common?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever come across another one.
Another Ralph,
had a twin. He had a twin called Roland who died very young, which was really sad.
That is sad. So if you have, so my maiden name is Brown. Yay, lucky me. And it, in the U.S., the 1950 census will be released in April of 2022. And that will be the first census that my dad is in. And his name is Mike. So I'm looking for a Mike Brown in the state of Washington. That's not going to be the easiest task. Thankfully, he was raised in a pretty small town, so I can narrow it down pretty quickly. But I am going to have to go through a process of elimination and saying, that's not my Mike, that's not my Mike, that's not my Mike, that might be my Mike, that's not my Mike. Okay, now I'm going to go back to all my maybes. But if I do this type of research first, I'm going to be much more prepared for finding my Mike in the census. And that is the same across all major record sets, right? Any record set that is from a national point of view, you're gonna want to do some of this preparatory, research and work so that you're ready to click on that census and know exactly which one you want.
I think that's really valid advice. And I am going to be very honest. I have never tried this technique before. Really? I will be trying it.
I love this technique. This is the first thing I do, actually, every time I start a new project, is I make a list of all the possible record sets.
Amazing. And then
it narrows it down, right? Findmypast is billions of possible records. Billions. That's a big number. I could spend all day, the rest of my life looking in those materials.
I was going to say all day. That might
all
be.
Day. All day, every day. Or I could narrow down and say these are the most likely ones first and prioritize that research process. Lovely. Right. So with that in mind, next slide. create your research plan, right? Rethink, and this is essentially a duplicate of the slide we showed you a few minutes ago, but repeat this process over and over and over again, right? Is your prioritized list still accurate, right? You've prioritized already once, but as you learn about these individuals, is that actually still the priority for you? And only you can answer that, right? Because your research goals are your research goals. So as you add details to your tree, as you are uncovering some of these new record opportunities, right, or research opportunities, your list should kind of always be changing. That target list of historical records kind of always evolves, and especially because Findmypast adds new records every week, right? So is there something new that you need to look at? So we've got a few weeks, we've got a couple months until this census is released. And my big suggestion for the day is take advantage of that time, right? You know exactly what day this information is going to be available to you. So take your research plan, prioritize everything, figure out what you want to learn, and then actually go, okay, in week 1, which would be now, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to build a countdown to January 6th. So I know exactly what I'm going to be looking at and who I'm going to be looking at, what records I'm going to be looking at every single week until I get to January 6th.
Because we're actually in a pretty good position here. Anybody that does have anything they want to look up in the 1921 census for England and Wales is because we know exactly when it's coming online.
Right.
It's not like with most of our record sets where you really just hear about them on the Friday.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we can really be well prepared for this as researchers. So think about all of this as you start to incorporate your approach to, and not everybody is going to be, fully organized and like get out a calendar. That's how I do it because that's the type of person I am. And Ellie's probably laughing hysterically on the inside, just going,
no,
"Yep, that's."
Do you know what? I'm going to stick with my wee list. But I have learned an awful lot in this session already, and it has inspired me. So I'm gonna go back and verify all of this. I'm gonna make all the notes, and I'm gonna be in a really good place come 6th of January. Just seen Sally's question.
I was just gonna raise that actually. Yeah. Sally, let's answer your question. So Sally wants to know, on the slide it gave Ellie's ancestor's name. How do we do that search? Okay, so on Findmypast, you want to go to the All Record Sets page, which you can find in the top menu drop down at the top of every page, basically on findmypast.co.uk or .com or .ie. There is a little search drop down menu, and you click on that, and it says All Record Sets. You can access all record sets from a number of other places, but that's kind of the key place, right, in that search drop down menu. So you go to that page, All Record Sets, and then filter by the country of interest, the county, and then the year span. And the list that is populated for you is every record set on the site that has at least one record from that time frame and that location. If it doesn't have a record from that time frame and that time location, it pulls itself off the list. So you won't even see it as an option. So all record sets is what you're looking for, Sally.
Thank you, Jen. And Victoria, it's maybe just because we're not allowed to tell you normally. Normally we get told keep stum. But with this, we were allowed to say, which was really nice. I was really excited.
Yeah.
Okay, right, let's move on. So we have teased this already, haven't we, Jen? It's not just this one document or the information you're going to find in it. There's so much more to think about.
So much more. And this list is kind of endless, actually. The bigger picture is, man, it could be just about anything, right? Just about any element of life could be a part of your ancestors' bigger picture. So certainly we want to talk to our relatives and ask questions. And that should be a relatively routine part of your family history process anyway. But specifically with something like 1921, there are people still alive that are that were taken in the census, or perhaps they remember their parents talking about the census. So your living relatives should be one of your first objectives. We have obviously discussed World War I, and that's definitely a big part of this historical picture. The Spanish flu is another big, kind of global thing that was happening at the time. drawing out those newspaper mentions and looking at things like one place studies and very specific, house history research, very specific types of family history, different elements of family history beyond just studying the lineage of a family, and really pulling into that social context part of our world, right? And some of the lines we've been using in some of our materials from Findmypast is saying things like, was your grandmother one of the first police women in her area? And the 1921 census is going to help you answer those questions, but so are newspapers and reports from the government and municipal records and all sorts of other types of materials that may or may not be available online. But that's part of building the research plan and understanding what you can access today and what you might have to go on site for or wait for or something.
Absolutely.
So creating that big picture is super important.
I mean, because you know, there may be a family story that says, you know, that your grandmother, your great grandmother was, I'm trying to pull an occupation out of thin air, one of the first female acrobats. I'm sure there were many female acrobats before then, but just bear with me just a moment. But unless you've gone and done your research around female acrobats in the 1920s England and Wales, that research that you're looking is sort of going to be a bit moot. You need to know the ground that you're researching before you go in.
Yeah.
If that made any sense at all.
Makes sense to me. I would love to find an acrobat. I've never found any kind of performer or anything like that. And I'm going to turn to the comments. Leslie beat us to it a little bit. Because I was going to refer to this in just a few minutes, but she suggests to check out your local family history society. Some have done some really great 1921 projects. And this is a yes, please, 100% go to the local family history society for the area that your ancestors lived in and the area that you live in now, because you may learn some really interesting things about your own neighborhood. Go to the family history society for the area you're researching and ask them what they've done, because a lot of them have done a lot of great work around the 1921 census.
And there's a good question here from Andrew as well. Do you mind if we answer this one as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Will redaction rules apply like in the 1939 register?
And the answer to that, Andrew, is no. The 1939 register was a living document all the way up through the 1990s, and many of those individuals are still with us. So for privacy reasons, the 1939 register was redacted. The 1921 census has been waiting 100 years to come to light, and we believe that the vast majority of those people have passed. Even if they are still alive, they were babies when they were in the census, and there's really no risk or threat from a privacy standpoint. So no redaction to the 1921 census of England and Wales.
Absolutely. Lovely. Okay, right. Let's move on to the next slide.
Yeah, and continuing to talk about the big picture, and I love this. This is some of my favorite stuff to do, right? And Ellie, I'm talking a lot, so feel free to jump in. But photographs and maps, and especially for 1921, we have a much bigger collection of media materials to take advantage of. Right? Go to YouTube and find the film footage. Look in the Francis Firth collection on Findmypast to find the photographs of your area. Like this one is High Street in circa 1920, and this is the area in which Ellie's ancestor Ralph lived.
In Worcestershire. Yeah,
I'm glad you pronounced it and not me.
Worcestershire. In any case, yes, the Francis Firth collection and also the Findmypast photo collection. If you just put in the year 1921 and pop in your county, your town, whichever area you're looking at, you're going to get a few results. And even if there's just a handful of pictures for your area, it can really give you an appreciation of what your town or your village or your city looked like back when this census was actually taken. I think there's something really quite special about that.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, there's nothing better than seeing life as they saw it. And photographs, film footage, other media files, maps, all help us do that. So take advantage of these collections because it's just the photograph collection on Findmypast is just incredible. I think it's amazing. I love it.
Oh, another great comment from Leslie here. I have to put this one up. Also look at the sound archives, listen to people telling you in their own words what life was like in the 1920s. We have a great one, Northwest Sound Heritage Archive. Yes, this comment, you get a cookie, Leslie.
You do, Leslie. And I will be going to the Northwest Sound Heritage Archive website immediately after this broadcast because I have not explored that one yet. That's a new one to me. So thank you very much for that.
And you've put maps on this slide as well, Jen. Why are maps so crucial for this background research into the 1921 census?
Well, first of all, maps are just amazing anyway. I love maps. Maps are a big part of my life. I have maps on my walls. Maps, you guys. But maps really help tell a story. And it's so much more than just where were they in the city, but or where were they in their village, right? It's much more about how close were they to their place of work? And thus, did they have to walk? Did they ride a bicycle? Did they have a motorbike, which was more and more common in this period? Did they use public transportation, right, to get to that place? Was it all the way across London or was it somewhere nearby? And beyond that, think about things like, in my mind, when I think about maps, I almost immediately go to natural disasters, right? Because I live in the western part of the United States. I think about hurricanes and blizzards and earthquakes. And so historical weather maps come into play. What were the big things that were happening in the town, the county, and the nation over the course of this period that would have impacted your ancestor? And there are maps that explain all of this for us, right? If he was a coal miner somewhere, there are coal maps for the UK and the coal regions of the UK for at least 100 years, right? That describe the level of geology. As they learn more about the world and the science of geology, they go into more detail and more depth. And you're going to start to see things like, well, that coal mine has shut down. And they were one of the biggest employers in the county. How did that impact my ancestor in the 1921 census? So maps can tell us a lot. Maps can give us an awful lot of information. And they're really, really valuable research tools.
I think another thing that will be quite interesting for me, very selfishly, for the census, is I believe, or I was told by my aunt, that my grandfather's family, that my great-grandparents moved them out of Gresford in Wrexham and further into North Wales, sometime between the 1911 census and the 1939 register, because of a coal mining accident at Gresford that killed quite a lot of people. And I believe some of my ancestors were among them, although I haven't yet completely verified it. So that would be interesting to look at as well, in particular by using the employer question and also the orphan question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Migration.
Yay!
Favorite thing.
Right. So if you suspect that migration happened at some point in this same time period, and I'm referring to both outgoing and incoming migration in and out of the British Isles, there are a couple of things in particular that you should be doing to prepare for the census. The first is to check the passenger list, especially passenger lists leaving the UK from 1890 to 1960. That is one of the more informative and detailed passenger lists that exists, that's digitized and available kind of anywhere, actually. And it's full of information of people from all over the world, really, leaving and migrating out into the rest of the globe. Keep in mind that during this period, Liverpool is one of the busiest and largest ports in the world. So even my ancestors who immigrated to Canada from Russia actually went from Russia across the Black Sea into England, crossed England by foot, I think, they end up in Liverpool, get a ticket, and from Liverpool they get on a boat over to Canada.
That's amazing.
Right? Like, what an incredible journey. So examine those passenger lists. That outgoing passenger list in particular is really important. And then take a look at all the census available materials that are available and census substitutes, right? Because not everybody has a census, for Canada, Australia, United States, and New Zealand, as those are the most likely destinations for someone who was born in the British Isles to end up in. Now, I say census substitutes in particular because Australia and New Zealand do not keep their census records. They've destroyed theirs. for a number of different reasons, but make sure that you're utilizing those census substitute materials for those regions where it becomes available. Canada is going to be a really interesting place to study because they've already released their 1921 census. So if you find your ancestor somehow in both, because I believe the timelines are relatively close, you're going to be able to narrow that immigration story down really, really, really specifically. And that's going to be a really interesting research area for a lot of people.
Amazing. There's just so much to consider, and I'm now very, very grateful that we have, 2 months to prep for.
Right, yeah, exactly.
We've got 5 minutes left, and we've not even touched on local history.
I know. This went really fast. So yeah, local history is, of course, really, really important, right? We want to think about things like World War I, which we've already talked about, but not just the war, but everything changed after World War I. There was these huge cultural shifts in just about every part of life. And not to mention that they're also rebuilding and repairing infrastructure, buildings that have been left unattended because of the war effort, right? After World War II, you have this rebuilding because of the bombings and the Blitz. But World War I, the impact was more economical, in my understanding, at least of history, and that may be different across the region. But from a general standpoint, right, that's kind of the case. So think about the local economy, right? Is the city government now saying, okay, the war is over, I can now refocus on the sidewalks, or making sure that the public transportation system is in a better place, right? Because they haven't been able to address those issues from a governmental standpoint for a number of years. Of course, we've talked about widows and orphans, and not just in our immediate families, but also in the community as a whole, because then the need to take care of those people, right? People donating to their local parish, for example, to be able to support orphans in the community. Did your ancestor have the money to be able to kind of increase their donation, or were the children sent to an orphanage, or perhaps even sent out of the country as a home children to one of these other countries, right? That comes into play, and that makes an impact, right? Even if it's not your ancestor, if your community suddenly loses 50 children, that's going to make an impact, right? From a whole lot of different emotional and mental standpoints. And think about things like the supply chain, right? What were they struggling to get? What were they still on rations for? Do you suspect your ancestor owned or rented their home? And that's pre-war, but also post-war, right? How did that change? Because that can give you an idea of their economic status. And, I've mentioned public transportation, bicycles, but how did they get around? What did they do? As England and Wales shift from this agricultural society and have gone through the transformation into a more, the term is escaping me, but the economy has shifted, work has shifted, more people are working in manufacturing and that kind of thing. How has the community changed? How has the needs of the individual changed? And then the children, of course, did they attend school? Where did they go? Did they keep up in fashion and society, the arts, literature? How did they feel about suffrage and the women's vote, right? Which is now suddenly come back to the forefront as a really significant issue, right? It was a big issue, and then the war happened, and everybody agreed to lay low. Now the war's over, we can go back to these kind of political questions. And where did they stand in those questions, right? What was your ancestors' opinion in those issues? Next slide, Ellie.
Next slide.
And a lot of this can be pulled from the newspapers, right? So this is all 4 of these articles that you're looking at are actually all from the same issue of the Evesham Standard and West Midland Observer from the 5th of March, 1921. I just went through, I think the issue was around 19 or 20 pages. And I went and pulled out all of these little individual things that helped me think about what the environment was from a cultural and social perspective, right? I learned about the local commons and their debates on government. I learned about war memorials being built and veterans coming together and socializing in some capacity. You learn about the parish council and how they're making decisions and deciding on what to do, right? In this case, they were offered some land and they're making a decision and publishing that decision in the paper. They're having debates about women's occupation, right? The little blue square is actually a letter to the start of a letter to the editor saying, this is my opinion on whether or not women should continue to work now that the war is over. So it's essential in my mind that we incorporate this type of research into our strategy for the release of 1921 so that we understand the environment in which our ancestors lived.
Exactly. And I think if we can do this, if we all can all do a little bit around our own families and our own ancestors and where our families came from, I just think we'll be in a better place when we come to look at the records and look at our families' names and our relatives' names. And in that moment, for you, when you first look at your ancestor on the census, it's not just the name and their address and their employer. You can actually picture that in your head about what their life was like. This is literally a snapshot. And you can maybe just appreciate it. Yeah.
So
too emotional about it.
I know, right? I know. So this comment, I've been waiting for a while for this to happen. And Janet finally made it happen for me. She says, my late mother met Johnson VC, who is the subject of that article on the screen about the war memorial. That's so great. I love it when those connections are made. So Janet, I would encourage you to go get this article if you don't have it already. The citation is up on the screen, so you should be able to access it.
Well, I think we're at the top of the hour.
We are.
The only thing left to say before everybody rushes off to make dinner and things like that, if you're in the UK, that is. So there is a handy checklist on the Findmypast blog with pretty much everything we have chatted about today, and you can tick things off as you go. I did see somebody ask if we could upload a PDF. How about, Jen, if we upload these slides somewhere and then people can download them? Yeah, should we do that?
That's fabulous. Yeah, let's do that.
Lots of information in the FAQs about the 1921 census for England and Wales. So if you do have any questions that we've not answered today, and Mary, who has been brilliantly manning the comments today, if she's not been able to answer them, you may find the answer to your question in the FAQs. There's lots of details on the landing page as well, which is findmypast.co.uk.com.au/1921. Then I can't even speak anymore. 1921-census. It's really easy to find. Loads of details in our newsletters and also, of course, in the Findmypast forum as well. Yes. Have I missed anything?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah.
So fun story. When Jen and I were just finishing up our preparation for this session today, we thought, it'll probably just be half an hour.
Yeah. That was naive and cute, wasn't it? There's so much to talk about. There's so much to cover. And I think, one of the pieces for me that's going to be the most exciting actually is hearing all of your discoveries and all of your stories as you start to put things together. And on January 6th, when you all start to dive in and dig into the census, it's just going to be incredible to see what everybody out there can discover about their ancestors. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you how everything is going. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I completely agree. One of the first things I will be asking in early January is, what has everybody found?
Yeah.
How did it make you feel?
Right? Yeah. And someone asked, how's the snow? Karen, there is a light dusting of snow. It's now covered the grass across the street. So it looks like it's stopped. No, it's still snowing, just smaller flakes.
Just smaller flakes. I have to say bye to I'm going to say bye to all of you, obviously, but Janet, diolch yn fawr iawn, croeso, and we'll see you. In terms of what else is coming this week, actually, so I'm recording a session with Paul Nixon tomorrow. That is going to go live on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about all the military records that we've got on Findmypast and how they can be useful for you, especially because Remembrance is just around the corner as well.
That's right, yeah.
So that's important to know. And then, Jen, you're doing Fridays Live this week, aren't you?
I am. And I don't know yet what I'm talking about.
Maybe just go through this again.
One day at a time. But yes, I will be back for Fridays Live.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Let us know how you're getting on with your research prep and everything. Keep asking us questions and
Absolutely.
have a fantastic week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.